Great. So it looks like we have some people funneling in. So we'll wait just, a couple seconds to get started to make sure people are able to join. But for those that are connected, hello, welcome. You guys are in the UBTECH Education webinar for STEM Plus.
Yeah, feel free while you're waiting. We're just gonna wait just a little bit longer. You're welcome to say hi, tell us where you're from, how you're feeling today. Send us a question. If you have any STEM questions right now that are on your mind, send them in there. We'll start monitoring all of that. Yay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we definitely want to hear from you guys. I'm very interested where everyone's from, and what you guys do STEM. So great.
We've got Saudi Arabia, Florida, Maryland.
Great.
Pennsylvania. Okay. Hello, everyone.
Wow.
Martin's here from the Northeast, just in case you're wondering where Martin is.
Yeah. Hi, Martin.
Oh. All right, I vote we get started.
Excellent. Great. Excellent. So just to reiterate, you guys are in the webinar from UBTECH Education for STEM Plus. We're going to go ahead and get started. So great. This webinar is going to be led by myself and my colleague, Kristina. So to introduce you guys to myself, I am Rusty, the image on the screen you'll see here, which is also my LinkedIn image, little known fact. So if you guys want to find me on LinkedIn and connect, that'd be great. I'd love to connect with people. So Kristina, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, Kristina Davis, Instructional Design Manager, in charge of all things curriculum. Our emails are on there, you guys. If you have questions after the webinar today or anytime, you're welcome to reach out to us. We also put the education email on there in case you have any sales related questions or questions about the website or questions that don't pertain to what we're talking about today. Feel free, you can send them to the education@UBT email as well. So 3 different ways you can get to us, reach out.
And then also, if you guys want to tag us on social, we'd love that as well. If you want to tag us Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, anywhere you guys are on, feel free.
Yeah, follow us, we'll follow you.
Great. Be a nice symbiotic relationship. Great. Great.
Okay, so who is UBTECH? You might be wondering if you're not familiar with us. So we are a global company in robotics, AI. You can see some of our industry robots there. Yanshi's on the right. He's more higher ed. Then we've got Addybot, disinfecting robot, super in right now, right, with all the stuff going on. And then Cruiser's over on the left. Cruiser is a hospitality robot. You could see Cruiser in an airport or a mall or anywhere around. So just know that that is our main parent company. And then our next slide is about us, UBTECH Education. So we're based out of LA. So we're North America. And then we just do all things kids, right? We try to get all of the robots and all of the tech that's out in the world to the students so they can be exposed to and have experience with those types of technologies before they go out into the real world.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, and what I love about our connection here to our larger company is we do, connect a lot with, some of our, larger industry robots to try to bring that industry expertise to the classroom, which is a lot of fun. Great. So before we dive into the bulk of this session, I do want to encourage you guys to utilize the chat box to ask any questions. If you have any questions or comments about what we mean by, STEM, integrated STEM or STEM plus, please feel free to put them in the chat now. We'll give you a second or two to formulate some questions. We want to make sure that we're addressing anybody's concerns, questions, ahead of time. So feel free.
We are also going to ask you to be a little interactive in this as much as you can in a webinar, right, where we can't see you or hear you. But we might ask you questions and ask for you to respond in the chat. So please have that up and be ready.
Yeah. And great segue, because we're going to ask you a question right now. So great. So we want to poll the audience, so to speak, or let you guys take a chance to respond to this question. But we want to hear from you guys. What does STEM plus mean to you? you guys are shy, that's okay. This is what we're going to be talking about. So, excellent.
Yep, we've got nothing yet. No one has typed in anything in the chat, but feel free to what STEM Plus means. And if you want to just think about it, that's fine. If you're a UBTECH person, I see several of you on here. Hopefully you know what it means.
Great. So keep this question in mind. Oh, and I love it. Darwin put in a message, integrated approach using robotics to STEM subjects like arts and science. Love it. Exactly, Darwin. It's kind of, creating that connection from STEM to, other subjects as well. Michael is also equating it to STREAM. So putting, additional letters into the acronym. STREAM would be, the R usually is reading, I do believe. But I've seen a couple other approaches actually.
Yep, we've also got technology integrated to STEAM. So STEAM, STREAM, STEM, STEM with the double M, like there's all sorts of different variations on what you could do with this.
Great. Excellent. Great. Thanks, guys. And one of what we're going to start this conversation first is, why we are developing, or why educators develop STEM content. And some of the, biggest factors in trying to drive this type of education is to try to equip students with these future job skills. And I'm going to list just a few of these and how these are a bit connected. But if we look at the top 10 skills from 2025, as described via the World Economic Forum, these are a lot of different overarching ideas and skills that students will need for future, careers. To highlight a few, analytical thinking and innovation. We try to connect students to solving complex problems that are also connected to real life experiences. In addition, we try to instill some fundamental ideas of leadership and social influence by working collaboratively, working together to solve those problems. We also try to develop a use of technology by monitoring and controlling different ideas and structures. And then very importantly, we also try to build perseverance by teaching resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility. So where do these kind of connect? And I'll let Kristina kind of jump in here, but this is kind of the idea of the changing workforce, in the future, changing careers, I should say.
Right, and before I give you more information on this slide, just a heads up, if you don't already follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of those, social media somewhere, please make sure you do. This past year, our marketing team's been working really hard on putting out posts that connect those top 10 skills to focus areas of our curriculum. So you can see those in a lot of their social media posts that they've made. So please go back and look at those if you haven't already.
Yeah, great connection, Kristina.
Okay, so as teachers, right, and educators, we're all working to prepare students for not only the changing workforce, but the changing world and the changing technology and everything that's going to be in the future when they get out of school, right? So we've got two just small graphics for you to check out. One is what will be the top 10 most in-demand jobs in 2020. Hello, we're in 2021. But what I really thought was interesting with this graphic is the STEM careers that are on there. And we always hear, right, that STEM jobs are not being filled as needed. There's the workforce that's coming out doesn't have the skills needed to do these jobs or the focus areas, or maybe kids just don't know enough about them. So when they get out in the world, they're like, well, I'm just going to be those jobs that I've seen, right? So we want to make sure that we're exposing kids to all different jobs, all different career paths, just making sure they understand what's out there right now and what could be in the future, right? So that's the point of the in-demand jobs graphic. Then if you're looking at the other one, what we thought was interesting about this one, and we'll talk about this more during our AI webinars coming up later this year, are the jobs that have a chance of automation, right? Those that could be automated in the future and those that have a low chance of automation. But if you look at those that are going to be or probably will be automated versus those on the right side that are less likely to be automated, you will see that those ones on the right side require a lot of personal skills, right? A lot of SEL skills, a lot of STEM skills.
Right.
We thought that was really interesting, because not to take anyone's job down, right? But a telemarketer, if we get a really good AI, they can do telemarketing, right? We get those robocalls all the time now. They don't even have to really sound real. But
Yeah.
yeah, we don't want right now, or have the capability of having like a dentist who is fully automated, right? We want a person there with great skills, with all that STEM knowledge.
Right, exactly. And I think also to kind of elaborate on Christina's point, if we look at these jobs that have the least amount of, or the least chance of automation, a lot of these jobs really correspond directly to these top 10 skills. So you have to be, perseverant. You have to be a quick problem solver. You have to work with people. But you can see that direct connection to those 21st century skills, which is kind of a great, solidifying factor for, how we're trying to engage students in this type of content. Great. Excellent. So in terms of developing STEM content, and for those that are also out there developing their own curriculum, here are a few different tips, if you will, kind of a guiding, outline for how we develop, how people are developing content in the future. So we want to, all of the content that is developed, we want to try to hit these 4 key buckets. The first one is we want to obviously advance the learning of each of these specific subject areas. So here we're utilizing the acronym STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. But for those that also want to, add additional subject areas, reading, arts, coding, etc., you could expand, this acronym, of course. But we want to, clearly identify and advance learning of each of these subject areas. In addition, we also want to provide a logical and real world connection to all of these topics. So we want it to be personal. This is important for developing this type of content because we want to have a strong buy-in from the students. We want students to be able to relate directly to what they're working on and why they're working on that particular objective or task. In addition, just as we've been touching on, we want to also connect back to these STEM careers because the world is changing and jobs, the workforce is changing. We want to create these nice pathways from what we're doing to, workforce development. And finally, of course, we also want to strengthen a lot of these 21st century skills. And just to highlight the reason we put this image here, this is an image from a curriculum unit where students are building a golf club robot. You'll see an image of a golf club. They're also connecting it back to core science concepts, of forces and forces in nature and gravity, as well as connecting to real world engineers who are utilizing the same thought process to develop different golf clubs, for example.
All right, so some other things to think about and what we thought about in creating our curriculum are obviously we wanted core science with STEM. Science is a big portion of that, right? And then all of our units are focused on NGSS. And so next gen science standards, which also build up on cross-cutting concepts. So you'll see that in the tables there. So things like cause and effect, patterns, connections to engineering and tech. We also focus on science and engineering principles. As I just said, all of our guides focus on the engineering design process. We also tie in design thinking, which is different. If you don't know the difference between the two, check out last month's webinar. We talked about that there. But we also try to connect to other areas. There are quite a few ELA connections just because of the presentations and the writing that the kids do and the research that they're involved in. We try to focus on SEL skills, like Rusty said earlier. Those top 10 skills, a lot of them are SEL skills. And we focus on the kids always working together. So collaboration, communication, cooperation, all of that kind of ties in there. And then, like I said, real world connections. So not only are we trying to bring in, like in the golf club, a robot for golf guide, right? Where the students are learning about golf, which is a real world connection in the club, but then talking about how the engineers look at it and what is, what's the best face on the golf club, right? To hit that ball the first distance, does it need to be rounded? Does it need to be flat? And so testing all of that, and thinking through like an engineer would, but you could tie in if you have a business in the area, then like say with that golf club one, if you have a golf course in the area, you could look at that. If you have a business where they maybe make golf clubs or tees or balls, like tie in anything real world in the community or outside the community that kids can go back to and go, oh, I saw that in this class. Like you want them to make the connections outside of the little bubble of your classroom, right? You want them to see all of the different things out in the world.
Exactly. Great. Oops, lost my cursor there for a moment. And now we do want to transition a little bit toward our specific curriculum within UBTECH. We want to highlight our curriculum units specifically aligned to our UKIT series, which our UKITs are a line of assembly robotic kits where, you know, students assemble their own robots and then, you know, program them to achieve different objectives. We currently have integrated STEM units for all of our kits from UKIT Beginner, Intermediate, and Advanced. And we're going to give you some specific examples of these different STEM connections throughout two of our units that we highlighted, which these two units we like quite a bit. So we wanted to pull these out because they make these connections pretty strong in how we highlight these different core subject areas. Excellent. So the first one we'll touch on is entitled A Robot for Rescue. And a lot of these images on the screen will make sense in a moment, I promise. I know you're like, why is he showing me a picture of a sheep here in an erupted volcano? But it will all make sense when we start tying it together. But this particular unit is geared towards a younger audience and utilizes our UKIT Beginner. Within this particular unit, students are given the challenge to think like an engineer and determine a robot that, and also, you know, define a criteria for a robot that is able to walk on four legs to render aid during an active volcano. So the students are designing this particular robot, you know, from our UKIT EDU app, which is called the Dinosaur Robot, which is a quadruped moving robot. And they're analyzing this structure of the robot, and they're redesigning, they're iterating upon this build to meet the specific objectives of this changing environment. This environment has been altered due to a volcano eruption, and they need to help render aid to, you know, people that are affected by this volcano by the uses of this particular robot. Pretty fun unit right there. I mean, just in my opinion, but to highlight some of these particular connections, what we're going to do now is we want to pull out the particular connections and talk a little bit about each of how we're hitting these different subject areas throughout a unit like this. So first, touching on those science connections.
All right, so in this guide, we're really focused on the area. It's the island of Hawaii. And so the area the kids learn about, they can explore the vegetation that's there, the habitat, what the volcanoes are like, what it looks like after it's erupted, habitats for the animals that live there, how do the animals survive or not survive, how hazardous does it become once the volcano has erupted, and then the big science connection here is Earth system. So they learn about the spheres, the biosphere, the biosphere. Now I'm gonna forget all of those because I just threw myself off. They focus on the spheres and they talk about how what's happening in the air interacts with what's happening on the earth, with what's happening, you know, with the biosphere, with the animals and the people that are there. So we try to tie in a lot of science connections. And then because we're working with robotics, we're also going to talk about gravity. We're going to like how the robot is stabilized, not stabilized. Gravity is going to pull it down if it's lopsided, how it walks and how it moves. So they get to analyze quadruped movement. We have a lot of physical science connections in there as well. So it's not just like one focus, right? We're trying to connect it as broad as we can to all different areas of science.
And we connected directly to the explosion in Kilauea, which I believe the largest big one was 2018 or so, or 2017. But this also makes and solidifies that nice real world connection, because we're not talking about, a volcanic eruption that happened hundreds of years ago, but we're talking about one that happened, relatively recently. So the students can really cite back to something that, is very relevant to them. In addition, we also make quite a bit of connections to technology usage. And the way that we do that, of course, the students are programming their robots to walk. They're then analyzing those programming structures, iterating upon that, that particular structure to achieve changing objectives. Within that, they're also focusing on how that programming structures are directly connected to their physical robot. And then they're experiencing and engaging in quite a bit of troubleshooting as well as debugging. This is an important part of the STEM process in general, because we want students to successfully go through this idea that they need to troubleshoot, they need to kind of think around different methods to create a solution, because this also solidifies that portion of resilience. So perseverance, and persistence through trying to solve an issue. I say this, and I'll probably say this in every webinar moving forward, but we want to engage students in failing forward. I think that's a really important part of the engineering design process, and also creates really active and complex problem solvers. We want students to not always take the easy way out. We don't want students to basically load a code, have their robot move, and then say, great, I'm going to lunch. I'm done with this, I'm going to the playground. No, we want students to actively program the robot, have it fall over, and then think, why did that fall over? And how can I change this structure in order to solve this objective? And then once they get comfortable there, we might just change the objective for them. We might have them iterate even further so they become really comfortable in that iteration process. This is something that's, very important and pivotal among our units as well as STEM content in general. Great, so moving on to engineering.
So some engineering connections here. There we go. Okay. So like I said, all of our guides focus on the engineering design process. Ours happens to be one we've created that all focuses, they're all I words like invent and ideate and that. But so if you don't already use an engineering design process or a loop of some sort, you can just Google that. You'll find so many different iterations, and that's totally up to you, whatever one resonates best with you. But we just want the kids to, like Rusty said, we want them to fail forward. We want them to not get stuck because something didn't work. We want them to know that there's always another option, right? You can always go back, you can try it again, you can trial and error, right? But you can test, you can retest, you can redesign, you can start all over if you want, and you just continue through the loop. So for this guide, for this robot, when they're working with the dinosaur robot, the building and assembling of the robotic structures obviously is engineering. They're prototyping solutions to the challenge that Rusty had shared earlier, but really just working through the process of how can I continue to improve and how can I make this the best design? Because in many of our guides, we promote and encourage that students and groups share what they're doing all the time. So if they're sharing their code, if they're sharing their build, but not only that, they need to share what is going on. Am I doing this right? Is this not right? Did I meet the criteria? Did I not? And then they need to look at feedback from other groups, right? If this group over here is doing really well and this one's not, we want them to work together as opposed to it being a competition, right? So we want them to assist each other through the engineering design process and to push them to go forward and continue, as opposed to, hey, I'm done, I finished it, it worked, congratulations.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then also to make the math connections apparent, we actually directly connect to quite a bit of math concepts by having the students examine different angles. So angles and kind of different structures here, because the students are directly looking at and changing the angles that their servos are moving by actually analyzing, predicting, and as well as iterating upon how they're programming the angles of the servos but they're also analyzing and looking at the angular effect of the elevation of the land that they're trying to navigate through. So we have this connection, back to both. So does the angle of the servo, correspond directly or indirectly with the angle of the terrain, etc. Of course, the students are also expressing all of their programming structures in a specific amount of time. We, throughout our programming structures, utilize everything in milliseconds, which is also another layer to their math connections, because they're thinking of breaking up seconds, within different structures in order to achieve the different tasks as well.
Can I expand on that, Rusty?
Definitely.
So with this activity, so the students not only look at maps, Google Earth, interactive maps of where the volcano is and the terrain around it, but then they're also going to take that information and they're going to build their own search course, is what we call it in the guide. So they build their own search course in the classroom using classroom materials, cardboard, sticks, whatever you want to throw in there. But they're going to build it, and they need to have some sort of angle, some sort of terrain, change in terrain to simulate like the lava flow and where the robot would go over that. And so that's where the angles all come in. They do analyze the angles of the code in the servo so they understand the movement. But just know that all of this is then put into the design challenge. So they learn all of this separately, and then we put it all back in together.
Exactly. Great. And then we also make, of course, our overarching, our non-STEM, non-mentioned in that acronym, connections as well. Some very apparent and very straightforward connections that we create this nice through line throughout this challenge is the students are focusing on geography, of course, by analyzing, the island of Hawaii. They're also have the chance to fold in different social studies aspects as well as history by being able to touch on the specific real world connections that the students can connect with, like volcanic eruptions, like the history of Hawaii, for example. As well as we encourage a lot of different SEL connections. So here the students are working in teams, they're collaborating, they're communicating with one another. They have different roles throughout the curriculum. And this helps make some of those nice SEL connections very apparent and strengthen some of those, bonding ideas that the students can have through working together to solve problems. Great. So great. Before we kind of move on to the next example, I would love to hear from you guys again, putting you guys on the spot. If you guys would like to, maybe the question is, who would like to utilize curriculum like this in the classroom, this particular unit? And is this something you would see you could be able to fold into your particular classroom? Feel free to think about that. Excellent. And I know Kristina and I, we do like to talk, so that's not a problem for us. But thanks, Tom. Tom just says yes, which perfect for us. That's a good response.
And I think while people are adding in here, yes, we have some good yeses. That's great. I'm glad no one was like, oh my God, this is awful. No.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to know, like kind of when we talked about the definition of STEM, right, is that everybody does it a little bit different, and that's okay. And we try in our curriculum to offer suggestions for extensions if you want to take this to the next level, if you want to simplify it a little bit. The focus is really that you're tying the concepts in as you're teaching, and it's not, I'm going to do science here, and I'm going to do tech here, and I'm going to do engineering here, right? We want it to all be encompassed, and we want these plus connections, right? We want these plus connections to be included seamlessly as opposed to a separate idea, a separate project, a separate classroom, whatnot. So like this one, like Rusty was saying, so with history, they can work on creating the timeline for the eruptions of the volcano, right? So then they're looking at the history of the volcanic eruptions. They can look at where's Hawaii on a map? Some students might not have any idea where Hawaii is on a map. So getting them to look at that and the topography of the island and how it's built up. We want that all to just be woven in. We don't want to try to separate everything.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's such a good call out, Kristina, and such a positive tool when creating STEM plus curriculum is this very smooth woven connection of all the subject areas. It's not something exactly like Kristina said where we want to, this lesson we're touching on science, this lesson we're touching on engineering, but a nice blended approach where you're kind of hitting each of these different subject areas simultaneously throughout the curriculum units.
Well, and I'm going to jump in there too, because that kind of sounds scary, right? So some people are like, I'm just a math teacher. I can't do science and this and that. It's not that the lessons have to be focused on each letter, right? If you're looking at STEM, on each area, all at the same time, all in the same intensity. You could have a more science-focused STEM lesson. You could have a more math-focused STEM lesson. And maybe if you work in a cohort, right, where you have several teachers all teaching together, maybe one could be, that's really good at science, can be working on the science concepts more so than the others. So the others could focus on the math concepts, which I know is sounding like I'm trying to split it back out. And that's not what I mean. I just mean they could be expanding on those concepts because that's their area of expertise, as opposed to trying to do all things 100% all the time. Like that can get overwhelming, especially starting with STEM. So just try to throw in little things here and there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think too, sorry to expand on that even further, Kristina, where I think you're making some really good connections in that a lot of these, this STEM plus approach does offer the educator to chime in with their particular expertise, or their particular subject area where they're trying to make, the strongest impact. They have that ability to elaborate and go off on different, tangential areas to try to solidify, core concepts that they're trying to teach for that particular session. And so I think it's a nice open-ended approach where you have a lot of content and the educator can kind of be in charge on how this content's being dispersed to the students.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Let's go to the next slide. We have a couple of questions. One I'm going to answer on the next slide. Tom, we're going to save your question for our Q&A section, if that's all right. We'll come back to that. So there have been a couple of questions about the grade ranges for this curriculum. So the example we just showed was for our beginner kit. Our beginner kit, the curriculum was written for grades 3 through 5. So the standards that are connected to that guide, or to those guides, excuse me, are 3rd through 5th grade. Does that mean it has to be in 3rd through 5th grade? No. If your kids have experience and the dexterity to work with small pieces and they're used to that, you certainly could take this down. You know your students better than we do. We just have it in 3rd through 5th because that's where most kids are at the level to use the little pins and the connections and the wires. So just know that that's where we have it, but that's not necessarily where you need to have it. And this kit that we're working on right now, our advanced kit, has Arduino in there. And so there's some other aspects to it. So we have this slated as middle school and high school. Our curriculum is written around 6th through 8th grade middle school, but then we've got some Arduino electrical engineering type stuff that could go higher up. So it really is dependent on your kids. Our intermediate kit's in the middle. It's written right now for 6-8. We're going to be making connections for 3rd through 5th in there so that you could just kind of pick up with your kids wherever makes sense for them. Okay, so hopefully that helps answer. We do have another set of curriculum, which we didn't talk about. Does have some STEM connections though, but we do have curriculum around artificial intelligence. And we're going to have some coding stuff coming out that will hit those younger grade levels as well. The AI curriculum goes K-12. So there are several guides for K-2 that does not involve the hands-on robotics kits, but does have activities that are hands-on in other ways. So I know that answers part of your question, Tom. The AI curriculum can be done virtually, and we'll touch more on that later, but we also have virtual robots we'll talk about. So that could be fun.
And also, to answer Tom's question, we also do feature a line of virtual camp curriculum as well. That's also accessible. That is aligned to our UKIT beginner intermediate. We actually have 6 total camps that are all intended and structured to be delivered in a virtual space. So it is a bit of a different approach. It still does have that STEM plus connection throughout the units, but it is a different approach than the units that we're walking through today.
Good questions, you guys. Please keep those.
Love it.
All right, so our next example, this is the last example we're going to give you there, this is going to be from our advanced kit. It's called A Helping Hand. And this guide just overall focuses on, it's more of a life science, physical science guide, focuses on like sense of touch and prosthetics. So that's really the big focus there. The challenge, oh, sorry, Rusty, did you want this slide?
No, you got it.
I just started talking. It was like, sorry. This was the first guide I wrote, and so I'm tied to this guide. The focus question for this one is, how can robotics be used to enhance our daily lives? And this really brings in design thinking, and that the students are tasked with, after learning about sense of touch, how we take in the sense of touch through our brain, how we respond, and then how can that transfer to robotics? So they build this robotic arm that you see here, and then they've got to add a sensor to it to give it a sense of something, right? They can use the touch sensor or a different sensor if they want, but then they also have to take that, they're going to take their whole robot apart, and they have to build their own prosthetic for either a human or an animal after they've researched it that really can help either in functionality or aesthetics, right? You want to improve someone's life that is going to use this prosthetic. So this guide is big on students creating their own prototype. They're not using one of our builds that we offer. They're going to, whether it works or not, show it to the world. So they have to come up with their own presentation. Community members, it could be other school classmates, it could be school board members, whoever you can get in to watch the presentations. We ask that they present. They're going to come up with a whole game plan on how to market and all sorts of things for this. So just know that this one, a little more advanced, right? We're in the advanced guide now, the advanced curriculum as opposed to the other one, but so many focus areas on this one. There's so much going on with this. So we'll get into it here with our science connections.
Great. Excellent. And so in terms of science connections, there are so many to pick through here, but some of the direct apparent ones is the students do explore, concepts of senses from the format of looking and analyzing their, 5 core senses. From there, they also are exploring some overarching and fundamental concepts related to gravity and forces, as of course, and then kind of connecting these two together by analyzing and experimenting with the ideas of biomechanics.
The gravity really comes in play there because you have to have a functioning prosthetic, right? So whether it's your center of gravity, if it's a prosthetic like your leg, or if it's grabbing something and being able to hold onto it, does it drop? Can you hold it? Those types of things. So.
Exactly.
All right, tech connections for this one. There's a lot, right? The prosthetics in general. If you have not looked up prosthetics recently or the history of prosthetics, which the kids learn about in this guide, so many cool things are happening, you guys, like sensors getting added in to where it's tied to the brain where people can feel from their prosthetic. They can feel the object they're holding, and how cool is that? So there's a lot going on with tech advancements in prosthetics and robotics, right, going together. Students are going to learn to program their robots. They're going to use sensors, which is a sense of simulation. So they learn all about how does that information from the sensor itself get to the brain of the robot, and then what happens once it has that information, right? So if you're using a touch sensor, something needs to happen if it's being pushed, those types of things. So just there's so much in this one with prosthetics and the advancement of prosthetics.
And I think to highlight one more concept related to the programming slide, you'll notice that these programming structures are very different than what you saw with the the last example. They kind of scale pretty dramatically where the students are kind of increasing their knowledge and experimenting more with different coding structures. So also within a nice, drag and drop, block building environment, but they do have a much, a larger task ahead of them, so to speak. So they expand a lot on what they've been doing.
Sure.
Excellent. So great. Also, to make those engineering connections, of course, the students are doing some, similar connections as well from, the last example. They are still building. They also still assembling their robotic structures, they're also really engaging in this engineering design process. You'll see the icon at the bottom of the screen, where they're really focusing on investigating, iterating, upon a design that they create. However, where this one kind of takes a little bit different direction is they're iterating, they're going through something that is very applicable to also these different engineering careers as well, which is assembling and prototyping, prosthetics. So I like this approach because it also doesn't leave the students in a theoretical space, but it brings them to a very practical, very real world space where they can make these connections to, actual careers. They can make them to, engineering uses of, for positive, they get engineering for, to help people basically, which I think is a very nice connection here that the students are exposed to. Excellent. So moving on.
Lots of math connections in this one, as you might think. But really the big focus on this one, like I mentioned earlier, is the engineering design challenge, where the students are asked to start considering, what will this cost to build? What will it cost to manufacture? What could I sell it for? Is it a product someone would want to buy? So it's kind of a Shark Tank type experience for the presentation at the end. But also, there's measurements in here, right? If they're going to build an arm for someone or a hand, it has to fit the body they're building it for, right? They're not going to build something massive for a little person or whatnot. We're also looking at sensor data, right? So they are connecting sensors. We want it to include sensors and the things that they learn, the science concepts they learned of the sense of touch or, pain or whatever they need for their prosthetic to grip, right? It needs to understand to grip. And so there's a lot of stuff they're looking at as they're programming. They can change angles of the servo. They can change the time frame, right? So when they go to grab a ball, we need that touch sensor, right, to be instant. We don't want it to wait because then the ball has dropped. So just looking at all sorts of different things there. And yeah, that's really what I got.
Yeah. And of course, there's a lot of really fun plus connections here. And I love some of these images that we pulled out of the curriculum, but there are a ton of connections that could be made to art, which we actually didn't see in the last example. However, the idea of prosthetics is something that is not only utilized in the space of advancing engineering, but can also advances the uses and connections of engineering and art and for artistic purposes. You'll see some of the images here. One of the superhero prosthetics here on the young lady's arms, which I think is such a cool approach as well. So creating, utilizing engineering and robotic skills for very creative purposes is something that I think is a really strong connection to make. In addition, we have some overarching themes of health, as well as language arts. And then just like the previous example as well, students also engage in a lot of these core SEL connections by participating, by collaborating. Just as Kristina mentioned, they do have a Shark Tank approach as well, where the students are directly giving feedback to one another and kind of working off of one another's thoughts. This does spill directly over to some of the core principles of design thinking. So we're not only just thinking and staying in the realm of the engineering design process, but we're also spilling over and designing different pieces of prosthetics, particularly to be utilized in by people. So not just utilized in a space of designing the best object for the for the reasons of it being the best, but designing the best use of prosthetics to be utilized in an appropriate way. Kristina, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add as well.
No, I think you covered it. It's just, I think some people, as they're planning these lessons, get so stuck on the one standard I need to cover or the one focus area, where sometimes it's just as easy as just go outside and look at a tree, or like to incorporate STEM. It's not as hard I think, as some people think it is, but also to get these other connections, right? Like they're creating a prosthetic. Well, making it their own is adding the art aspect and making it, adding whatever extras they want to make it cool. ELA, if you have the kids present, you're hitting a ton of ELA standards. Help the five senses, and it needs to be a functioning limb. Some of these connections are super easy to make. I think some people just get so stuck, right, in the silo that they're working in that they don't think to add in this stuff and to just try to weave it in. All right, so some considerations that we wanted to leave you with if you're creating your own STEM curriculum or trying to integrate the other subjects in with your STEM. So not all subjects, we've said this already, not all subjects have to be the main focus. You don't have to do STEM, tech, engineering, math 100% all the time. You can have a STEM lesson that's more focused one way or the other. And I know we didn't talk about this unit, but another one of our advanced units, About Above the Tide, is really history focused. So like it's all STEM, but it's focused around flooding that happened 100 years ago, right? But it always ties back to that. How could we have avoided it? How could we have worked toward surviving it better? So you can, it's just a history story, but then all these STEM connections are tied with it. So I just think that one's kind of fun too.
Yeah. And I think to, elaborate on the bullet point above, not all concepts do have to be taught in isolation. So we touched on this throughout, this webinar, but really meaning that we can have a blended approach to, incorporating all aspects, all subject areas through one nice, story or one nice channel that the students can touch everything kind of moving forward.
Right. And I don't know how it is in middle school and high school. I was a former elementary teacher. So as an elementary teacher, you're teaching everything anyway, right? You're teaching science and math and everything in your classroom. So if you can come up with a story or a challenge of some sort that you can touch concepts in all those different areas, like how much easier is your day then, right? If you're getting all of that stuff covered with one unit per se, as opposed to 4 separate units.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And tying back in with that next bullet point, you don't have to do it all on your own. If you're in a cohort, if you are the science teacher and you want to work with the math teacher on a project, like work together. I think some of us just get stuck in our own rooms and our little bubbles, and you gotta branch out. You don't have to do it all by yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And to expand even further, utilize outside resources, and this can be literal as well. Go outside, look around, like Kristina mentioned. But, it doesn't have to be something that you all, you make up on your own, that you just, you sit and Google and find everything on your own. There's a ton of great resources to leverage and utilize, and making sure that you're able to kind of, hit those and explore those will definitely help within your, your STEM pathways.
Well, and not only just outside resources that you're collecting, but outside resources like your community. If you have like a robot for rescue,
yeah, great point.
Like a search and rescue team in your area, or like if you can bring in people to talk about their jobs that tie back in with the topic, or those community members can come listen to your student presentations and provide feedback. Like try to incorporate all the help you can, all the outside connections you can. And it doesn't have to be that big all the time, right? It could be little. It could be you've got one mom who was an engineer in a past life, like have her come in for one project. But the more you can get others involved, the more excited the kids are, the more exposure they have, right? To then all those things as well.
Yeah. And if you have the resources and you're doing the dinosaur unit, take a field trip to Kilauea, go to Hawaii. Why not?
Take those kindergartners to Hawaii.
And invite us. Well, definitely we can go as well.
There'll be some tour guides. As you've seen throughout this presentation, hopefully, make it hands-on. Get something in the student's hand. We do not want them just working from a textbook. We don't want them just listening to you talk, right? We want it to be interactive. We want it to be hands-on. We want to include those top skills we talked about, the collaboration and the problem solving and the analytical thinking. They can't do that by sitting there and looking at a worksheet. So please, let me take that back with the worksheet. They are going to have to collect data. They are going to have to research. They are going to have to write things down, but try to make it interactive and hands-on and really solidify that learning through physical touch and physical movement outside of just listening and writing things down.
And I think that also corresponds great with the next, bullet point, but it doesn't all have to lead to one culminating, project at the end. There could be, micro wins, micro challenges throughout your different sessions. But I think this really points back to that, previous bullet point. But as long as you're trying to make it hands-on, engaging, and interactive, the students will have a better experience with the content, and thus they're more likely to retain the different content areas or concepts they're trying to learn.
Well, and I think with that last bullet, a lot of teachers, because it's the ease of the lesson plan, right? You're teaching all your concepts in their own bubbles. You're getting everything done, and then you're like, oh, I can do this one project. We can tie it all together. That's great. We're not saying don't do that if that's how you can tie it in, but we try in our guides to, we might introduce a concept in lesson 1, and they're going to touch on it in lesson 2, 3, and 4. We want them to see it more than once. We want them to apply it. We want them to learn it in different formats, in different ways. So just trying to not use the project as a test per se at the end of could they understand the stuff, did they not, did they apply it? We want it to be like everything else, woven in. You can teach concepts as you go. You can do little mini lessons like Rusty said as you go, to just try to make it more of an interactive, fun unit.
Exactly. And then, lastly, kind of a no-brainer as well, but we want to always tie into those career pathways as well. We want students to be able to connect to actual careers where, people are solving very similar challenges that we just, presented to the students as well. We want to make those pathways more apparent and also a lot shorter for students as well. We don't want it to be something that, an engineer is way up here and you can never reach that, but we want to try to get the students as close to that idea as possible. Because of course, we want to instill the students with the self-awareness that they can achieve whatever they set their mind to. And the way that we can make those connections even more apparent is by creating those pathways, creating much shorter paths to those careers. Excellent. Great. So that actually kind of brings us to the end of our webinar. So we'd love to turn it over for you guys. If you guys have any questions, we can definitely answer some.
I'll throw some questions at you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So somebody did, just so that everyone can hear this, because not everyone else got the question, is what curriculum do you have for ScoreBots? Do you want to elaborate on that, Rusty?
Absolutely. So we do have a curriculum for elementary as well as middle school that's dedicated to our ChampBot series, which ChampBot is a GMU robot where you can build 3 different particular robots, one of which is the ScoreBot. So ScoreBot is a pretty nice version of those different robots. So those units are featured and themed around competitive uses of robotics. So students engage in different competitive activities with their robots. So if you're really focusing directly on ScoreBot, you could definitely have the students build that ScoreBot and then also, compete in these different activities. It's a really fun one.
Sure. And there's a camp curriculum around that one as well, right?
Exactly. So yeah, I guess we have 3 total units that designed around that particular robot.
Yeah. Okay. And then I think we've touched on the grade level bands. So most of our stuff is focused grades 3 and up if it's hands-on robotics. The AI stuff is K-12. The coding curriculum, I think we're also looking at 3rd grade and up, but yeah. Like Rusty kind of mentioned in one of the screenshots there of UCode is a block-based programming environment. I couldn't think of the word for some reason. You can also do syntax, so text-based programming, but we're going to do all that next month. So please come to our webinar next month. You can see more about how that works. But if your students are familiar with Scratch or code.org or any of those, they could jump right in and use UCode as well. Let's see. So our next question is, I talked about that. So Tom had asked, we'll make sure we answered his questions. Any other options available for the virtual classroom Hands-on is very important, but given the challenges of last year and this year, that makes it hard. Yeah, do you want to touch on, I know you responded to him with the summer camp. Do you want to respond about that or virtual robots or anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have created a pretty robust catalog to support virtual learners. Of course, because of the shift in education due to the pandemic, we saw the need and we saw that we had the ability to kind of aid educators, in that area. So we did create a full camp curriculum catalog. And what I mean by that is we created a way to deliver this type of content through a virtual environment and virtual setting. So to kind of support those educators in the virtual environment, our curriculum catalog does feature 3 specific units for beginner, 3 for intermediate, and also 1 for ChampBot. These are structured to be delivered in a virtual format, of course, over the course of 5 days, 2 hours per day or so. Though we have a ton of different interpretations of the curriculum. Of course, it doesn't have to be as standardized as it's written. Of course, you guys know that, being flexible teachers for sure. But that's also something we also personally do, is we also work directly with educators to also modify curriculum to meet the needs of their particular environments and sites.
I will point out, because I think there's some confusion between virtual robots and summer camp. So the summer camp, the curriculum has all been done virtually. It's all been taught virtually, but the robots themselves are physical and each student has a physical set with them. Mm-hmm. Their challenges and everything still involve a physical robotic set. It's just that the kids have their own at home, as opposed to being in a classroom working with a group of students on them. Normally, we would say our curriculum is written for a 4-to-1 ratio, 4 students to 1 kit. So camp has really taken the one-on-one approach. And so with that, your students could check them out. You could divvy them up however you want, but do know that there is a physical robot aspect to camp. It's not just all virtual.
Yeah, great clarifier there, Kristina. And I guess that is a great segue. And also, you mentioned this, next month, we are going to be touching on, and I'll go ahead and leave this slide up here, but we don't have to necessarily, be done with questions, but yeah. We are going to be doing a webinar particularly around UCode, which is a free coding platform, which is browser based. And within this within this environment, we do have a virtual robot programming environment. So we have the ability to drive robots in a virtual space. We have quite a few of them, and we also feature different challenges, different objectives that students can achieve within the virtual environment. So if you're interested in trying to utilize virtual robots and leverage them, definitely attend this webinar. We're gonna have a lot of fun, demonstrating and showcasing a lot of what we can do within this browser-based environment.
Yes, so yeah, we've got several different virtual robots and they can tie back to the physical ones. So if you have a kit and your kids are working virtually with the robotic arm, and then they can build the robotic arm, so that's kind of cool. We do also have, for every one of our kits and for all of our curriculum, we did create these guides called Guide to Learning Environments. And within there, we created tables that explain, hey, if you're in this lesson, in this section, and you're virtual, this is an option. So we did try to give all that we could without knowing everybody's individual teaching situation. We tried to give you tidbits, tricks, tips. Here's what you can do if you're virtual. Here's what you can do if you don't have robot kits right now. Here's what you can do if you're in the classroom and need to sanitize everything. So we do have quite a few resources, I feel, to try to support all the different learning environments that are occurring at this point. Another question we have, Rusty, is any consideration of a live streaming tour training? I don't know that I know what that means.
Yeah, maybe Tom, if you want to elaborate.
If you can elaborate a bit. I'm going to go to the next question while you tell us more about that. So does UBTECH have a virtual simulation tool for robotics programming? Yes, that's next month. Come join us next month. And you can see more about our virtual robots there. We do have, Martin would like us to share, There are some promo bundles going out right now. So back to school bundles, mixing of the kits, all sorts of stuff. So if you're interested in purchasing kits, you can reach out to Martin or Nick if they're on here. You're welcome to use that education@ubtrobot.com email. You can email one of us, that's totally fine. Or if you find us on LinkedIn or whatever, message us. We'll get you some information there. We have another question about what robot or kit is available for lower elementary? So the beginner, intermediate, and advanced are our 3 kits. The beginner is written, the curriculum is written for grades 3 through 5. Then we jump up to 6, 8 on the next 2. However, if your kids are really good at using beginner, there's no reason they can't go to intermediate. The addition is the sensors. So the kit itself is almost the same. There's a lot of similarities there. And again, the curriculum was written to go around the standards. So not necessarily that it can't be taken down or taken up. You can adjust that as you need to with students. Just know there's tiny little pieces. So the younger you go, the harder it is for some of those kids to use. We've got, let's see. Oh, Martin's sending all sorts of information about the kits. So yes, with our kits, you get our curriculum and you get our guide to learning environments that I talked about. You get some implementation guides, you get all sorts of stuff. Oh, Darwin has 3 sets of UBTECH robots already in his classroom.
Love
So
that.
that's awesome. You're going to want to definitely join us for UCode next.
Yep.
Okay. Martin says you can reach out to him if you'd like. He sent his email out to all the panelists, so you should have that. Tom said, besides the virtual camp, what other events do get the communities involved, more exposure to parents in the community, the better? Absolutely. So some ways you can do this, not even just necessarily with virtual, but you could do like a STEM night or a robotics night. That can be virtual or it can be in person, right? Have the students create something that they can present to the others, whether it's STEM focused, robotics focused, if they just are showing a program that they created, or I mean, anything really, right? Get the kids to present, so that can get parents involved, that can get community involved. Ask your community if you've got some companies you can think of right off the bat, and maybe it's not even in the sense that they manufacture something or they create something, but what if like you go to the police station and you said, hey, if you could have a robot that could help you with anything, what would it help you with? And have them kind of create a design challenge for your kids, and then have them come in to present or to share or to look at what your kids are doing. Like, you could have the community involved in so many different ways. Like, just reach out and see what they can do. Maybe they can help donate stuff to your class. Maybe they can be there for presentations. Maybe they can give a design challenge. Like, so
I love that idea, Kristina.
Sure. Take a tour of their space.
Excellent.
Okay.
Great. So I know we went a couple minutes over our time, which is great. That means we're having a great discussion. So I do want to thank everyone for, participating and interacting with us. I love that. So I appreciate you guys taking the time. Don't forget to visit our webinar next month. In the meantime, please make sure, tag us on social, visit our website, connect with us on LinkedIn if you want to connect with us personally. But yeah, definitely, follow us, and we have a lot more coming in the pipeline. So we're excited that you guys are attending these, and we hope that you guys are, enjoying these as much as we are. So.
Yeah, I put the website in the chat, so ubtecheducation.com. Just a couple things on there, you guys. You can find out more about our kits if that's what you're interested in. You can get curriculum samples if you create an account. You can see our free UCode activities. You can peruse those before next month's webinar. You can find our webinar series from last year, which was all AI focused. There's just so many ways, just so many things. Find us. Rusty, can you go back to the slide that has our contact information on it real quick? Just
Absolutely.
in case you have additional questions we didn't answer, we'll put our emails and stuff back up. Feel free, reach out to us. If it's just a general question and you're not sure who to ask, use that education@UBT-robot email. But find us. You can find us, follow us. We'll follow you. Thanks so much. Oh, we have somebody. Gloria found us at ISTE. Thank you for
Yeah, I love that.
We're just at STEM Alliance today. Like, we're trying to get all over. So follow us. Tell all your friends. We're fun. Join us next time. But anyways, it was great to see you all. Thank you so much for coming. And we will see you next month with UCode.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.
Bye all.